Afternoon. After lunch is not always the greatest slot to get, I'm aware. But I once had to do an 8:30 speaking slot on a Sunday morning in New Orleans. So anything after that is an upside. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about kind of my long history through local. I have no PowerPoint presentation, which actually was a line I got applause for at some other conference, but we'll see. I've been hearing that local doesn't work for about 18 years now. I've been in digital since April 1995, and ever since I've been on the internet, you hear one time after another, and I can go through my experience and tell you all the different times I heard local doesn't work on the web, local doesn't work on the web. But 18 years later, I'm still doing it because I know it does, and it's just a matter of us continuing to work different models. And as you can see from the people at this conference, the companies that are here, you obviously all believe in it, you wouldn't be sitting here. So I'll just give you a little bit of background because I actually got called an old school digital guy the other day, which means digital has now been around long enough for you to be considered old school, which I guess is a good thing. But I started on the digital world in April 1995 when I went to go work for Digital Inc., which was the new media subsidiary of the Washington Post. And we started on a horrible system called AT&T Interchange, but eventually decided to go join the internet like everybody else in April 1996 when we launched WashingtonPost.com. And right from the start, we were looking at all these different, we were building online directories for advertisers. We were doing all these things locally. We were taking an absolute bath financially, but we were learning a lot about the need to engage the community in ways that they had not been engaged before. But we were missing all sorts of pieces at that point. We didn't understand engagement. We didn't understand the two-way nature of the medium. We had no clue how to make any money. We didn't even have payment systems on the website to actually gather any money. So any idea we had to get money was sort of screwed up by the fact that we had no way to collect it online. So I stayed there for about 4 years and decided to move over to AOL in 1999. Partially, I didn't work in digital cities. I was intrigued by the idea of a big company like AOL trying to go into all these markets and build really useful products. But it became pretty obvious not long after getting to AOL that the only way you can really win locally is you can't be as big as AOL because you can only get so close to the ground in terms, I know they're doing patch now, but back in the day when I was there was no patch. And this huge company using primarily databases and a lot of automated work was just not able to provide a meaningful site for any of the cities really that we were trying to do with digital cities. And the lesson learned from there was if you don't really have a presence, if you don't have a physical presence and an emotional presence in a town, it's very, very hard for you to be successful from an editorial standpoint. I'm not talking about classifieds, verticals, and things like that. And so after I left AOL, I went back to WashingtonPost.com to be executive editor of the website in 2004. And really decided this is the time to push for local. Washington Post is a strange beast. It's a bit of a hybrid of local and national. But from a pure definitional standpoint, it's a local paper. It's only distributed in the Washington, D.C. region in print. And so we decided we were going to really attack local. We were going to attack all of the things that made local sites exciting, conversation, getting content from readers. And so we tried a lot of things when I was there. One was, let's do a local homepage so that we would automatically sniff out where you were dialing in from, and if you were dialing in from the local region, we would give you a very heavy local page, and if you were coming from out of state, which about 85% of our uniques did, you would get this big national page. So we tried that. It held on for about 5 years until the Post redesigned its site a few years ago, but also learned from that scenario that there is still something about the shared experience of people coming to a website, and we got a lot of complaints about people who didn't understand why the Post they didn't even understand why they were getting a different homepage depending on where they were from. And local residents coming in from outside the area, if they were traveling, sometimes weren't getting the right page. So and the Post still frankly struggles with this problem of being a hybrid local national, and they've always stuck between which of these two do we want to be successful financially. And we also, at the time we were there for the hyperlocal, we launched one of a few failed hyperlocal experiments I've been involved in my life. Well, this one I was not directly involved in. I just worked at the Post at the time, something called Loud and Extra. If anybody remembers Loud and Extra, which was the Washington Post's attempt to build a hyperlocal site for a county with 1 million people. So the definition of hyperlocal, that's a whole panel. I mean, you guys maybe have had one on that already. The term is sort of a term that we were, talking about this at the happy hour the other night. The term has sort of become meaningless because nobody can really define exactly what it is anyway. But we tried this, and we did everything, a lot of the things we thought were important, but we forgot one little key element, which is we decided that we had to power it all ourselves by hiring reporters and enlisting the Bureau to do all this work, and we basically kept the readers out of it in any meaningful way. And we gave them what I would call like engagement by letting them comment on articles and occasionally submit something. It's a type of engagement, I always sort of secondary engagement. It's like letting somebody on your front stoop, you know, but not letting them in the house. We're not going to let them touch any of the valuable stuff. We're not going to really engage with them. We're just going to make them feel like they're engaging with us. And so that experiment failed because the community had no connection to it. It was just the Washington Post aggregating all of its Loudoun County content in one place. So what? So that didn't work. But even though I wasn't directly involved in it, sort of got the bug of wanting to do something really hyper-local. So I left the Post in '09 and decided to compete against them immediately by launching something called TBD.com, which is also a late great. That one I don't think should have ended when it did, but TBD was a true hybrid model. The hybrid model was, let's be honest about how we're going to scale local to work from a business perspective. Right? It's not going to work if we feel like we have to provide all of the resources covering all of the things in this area. We just don't have the money to have a newsroom of 100 people running around all these different parts of Washington, D.C., covering things. We know that there are certain beats that are woefully undercovered. Let's take our reporters and put them on those. And then let's leverage the blogging community in Washington, D.C. Let's leverage other media outlets that are producing good journalism. And let's just put together a website that basically says, if you live in Washington, this is the place to come to find out what's going on. Because when I was at the Post, there was very strong resistance in the print newsroom to linking out to anybody, right? Because, I mean, we all know if you don't put links to any other things on your site, people never leave your site. So, you know, it's a sort of ludicrous idea that all we might do is let people know there are actually other news outlets in Washington, which every news consumer already knows. So we had the idea. We hired a reporting staff of about 12. We threw them at things we thought were really important, like transportation. We found some beats that we didn't think anybody was covering at all, and we sort of threw people at things that we didn't think were covered, and then layered around it a blog network of about 250 local bloggers who we brought into the office, showed them what we were doing. About a third of them signed up for the ad network that we built, and we also started linking off to any site that produced something that was relevant to the area. And the site, within about 90 days of launch, was about, I think the third month we were live, actually, we had 800,000 uniques and about 8 million page views. You know, not bad for 3 months in. And we were making a lot of noise because we were covering breaking news events with completely different mindset, right? We gave up on the idea, you know, there was a situation, if you remember, a hostage situation at the Discovery Channel, I guess that would have been 3 years ago now. And we were watching how we were covering it versus everybody else in the community, and it was all live blogging, and it was all bringing in comments from the community, and you went to every other media outlet in town, and it was rewriting the lead. Let's just rewrite the lead story. Over every 5 minutes, we'll rewrite the lead story, and the consumer coming to that story, of course, has no clue, you know, if the story's evolved or not. So we took different coverage methods. We also geocoded every piece of content. We actually hired 3 contractors and had them basically sitting in a back room, just geocoding every piece of content produced about Washington, D.C. by us, by the Washington Post, by the local TV stations, by the local bloggers. And so if you gave us a zip code, we could give you back a feed of everything that had been written about the area you lived in from anybody in town, which was the most clicked on part of the page. So despite the fact that we were getting a lot of good buzz, we were getting pretty strong traffic, for reasons I'm still not sure of, our owners, the same folks who started Politico, decided 3 months in to scale it back dramatically, which I was given a 5-year runway, and so I only was 67 months short of that before, or actually I'm not doing my math, no, 57 months short of that, before they decided, for reasons, like I said, I'm not totally sure I understand, although I have my theories, they decided they needed to back that down a little bit. And the other thing we did at TBD was focus heavily on using location, as I said, but also on mobile. Our mobile products were completely different than the web products. And I think mobile is a really important thing for everybody to focus on. I don't think that's news, but the reason I think it's actually to me, it is the first real development in media in the last 10 years that actually plays into the hands of local publishers a lot more than it plays into the big boys. A lot of technology is about scale, and a lot of these things work for the really big. But I am the editor-in-chief of a company called Digital First Media, which owns 75 daily newspapers in the country, including the Denver Post, San Jose Mercury News, Salt Lake Tribune, and many others. And for us, the difference between somebody standing a half a mile away in Salt Lake City is everything. I mean, we can deliver them different advertising, different content. We can deliver them an amazing amount of content about whatever little part of Salt Lake City they're in. And when you get at the really high level, I think the really big providers can't really get to that level of specificity. They can tell you where restaurants are around where you're standing, but they can't tell you about news. They can't really give you the history of that community and any real emotional connection to that community. So we have focused heavily on mobile and on location because we think from an editorial and a business perspective, it's going to be a significant part of our future. Still a couple of years away for sure, but the more we start building that infrastructure now, the better. So after leaving TBD, I joined this operation, as I said, 75 dailies, about 200 weeklies, and about 60 million uniques a month if you add up our entire platform. So now, after having being in a single paper, albeit a large one, and being in a big conglomerate like AOL, and then doing a startup, now I'm trying something it's another new thing for me, which is trying to figure out how to do local at scale. And so one of the things that has been exciting about this particular job is we have 75 papers, and every single one of those papers only is going to survive if they cover their local community well. Right? So national news, nobody goes to the New Haven Register for their coverage of Afghanistan. And if they do, they're woefully uninformed about the war in Afghanistan. Not that we don't put Afghanistan news in the paper, but we don't have anybody in that newsroom who's a real expert in that area. So the project that we're actually building here in New York, or have built most of it now, is this. It's got a nice, sexy name called Thunderdome. And I didn't name it, but it's a great recruiting tool, I'll tell you that. So we're building an operation here that, even though it sounds inherently non-local, it actually is focused on local, which is we are producing all the non-local news out of one place so that we don't have 75 newspapers around the country taking the gun control press conference from today and each individually building out a web page. And, all right, I'll pull it out of I'll put it in the content management system. Maybe I'll put a picture in if I have time. But for the most part, I'm just going to take an AP story, throw it up on the website, and move on. We have somebody in New York who can build a really great package about the gun press conference. They can layer in related links to, gun law, history of gun laws, and all these things that can make this a great online package, and then just put it in content management system and allow everybody to use that version. And now all you're doing at the local property, as opposed to having to build this out, is all you got to do is put a link up somewhere, post a story. And we have found out in some of our newsrooms that may save 15-20% of staff time, just the production of news that is not actually about the town where that body happens to be sitting. So we have now hired about 40 people up here. We have a world editor, a national sports editor, national entertainment editor, and slowly, and it is still slowly because we are working toward being on the same content management system. So right now we do have a lot of, there's a little more steps in the process than there will be in 6 months. But already newsrooms are starting to be able to take people who are now not doing wire work all day, and they're starting to be able to throw them out back on local efforts. Whether it's adding another person on a reporting effort, whether it's adding another copy editor in, it's hiring a photographer. And so what we're doing here is truly to serve the local newsrooms and actually allow them to hire up a little bit because, as you know, in this business, nobody's been hiring up for the last 10 years. And I would say that the overall staff total we have is not going up either, but we're able to take the people who are doing relatively rote work and replace them with people who are doing things that are inherently local. And so that's a lot of what Thunderdome is, and also what Thunderdome is it's sort of a plug-in to the entire company to get it to be more digital. There's a lot of people, including myself, who have run around the country for 15 years making snide comments about newspapers' adoption to digital, and I think most of them hold true. Incredibly slow, risk-averse, all the things that, have gotten us in the position we're in now. So we also feel like while we can build this really cool this whole team in New York, the whole company's got to change. We just have to think more digitally. And when we took over Media News Group, which is 57 of the 75 dailies, we also run a company called Journal Register. We changed the name of the company to Digital First Media because your company might as well say what you want to be, and that's why we picked the name. And so our newsrooms are all in this transformative stage right now where we're trying to have that startup mentality. You know what? Let's fail at some things, let's try some things, but be really quick about assessing and reimagining if we need to, or recalibrating. We're trying really hard to remove layers. A lot of newsrooms say, how do you expect me to make it in a digital world when you're talking about digital dimes against print dollars? And my boss, who's the CEO of the company, always says, if your issue is you get dollars in print and dimes in digital, then you better start stacking the dimes, because that's what you're going to have. The audience is moving to digital. There's nobody in this room, I'm sure, who would argue that. And so we just got to start figuring out how to stack the dimes. But to do that, you got to obviously look at the cost side. I would put myself on the side that says there's no way you're ever going to pay for, you're not going to be able to make the same amount of money in digital that you made in print. You're just not. You're going to have to figure out how to restructure your cost if you're going to make it in this world. So we have done things that not a lot of other newspaper companies have done. We've removed an awful lot of layers. We got a lot of grief last year at the Denver Post because we, in a sense, we took the copy desk and made it about a fifth as big as it had been. And in the sort of the media world, the media reporters writing about us were, oh my God, the world is ending. We have fewer copy editors than we used to. And look, I was a copy editor at one time, and it's an important task. But when you're looking at restructuring newsrooms for the future, you have to focus on creation of original content, people who can edit that work, and then people who can produce the digital content that you need around that. And in the end of the day, you're going to have to cut somewhere, and that was where we cut in Denver. Fast forward since then, Denver's had wildfires, it's had Aurora, it's had huge stories, it's had the Broncos, and yet nobody ever talks about the copy editing at the Denver Post anymore because it's still pretty good. And we just recalibrated, we restructured, we stacked a lot of responsibilities onto different folks. So this is an example of what we're trying to do in every newsroom. And right now, we're building our newsroom around 4 things, really. All of our newsrooms have to be able to address these 4 things effectively to make it in the local world. One's breaking. If you can't, that's just price of entry. If you can't cover big breaking news in your backyard with the biggest news staff in any city, you're not going to make it. So you have to have breaking. Engagement. We have Steve Butchery, who's works for us, if you don't follow him on Twitter, he's probably tweeted 82 times since I started speaking. He's one of the best social media guys in the world, and especially as it relates to media. And we have him on staff going around the country training on social, and engagement is everything for us because the only way we're going to be more profitable on our local sites is we have to get engagement up. We got to get people to hit more pages per visit per month than they're hitting right now. So engagement is the second. And the other one actually goes against a lot of what I just said about having to restructure costs, but it's enterprise and investigative. Well, a lot of other newsrooms have slashed that in the last 10 years because, big long stories. We have not. We've actually just made sure that every one of the groups of papers that we have has people dedicated to doing enterprise and investigative because that's stuff that really not only papers like ours with the size and the legal protections can do, but there's not a whole lot of people out there doing deep investigative work, and we feel like to be successful and to really represent your community and, as they say, oppress the power, to report on those who are have the power and to make sure that people who don't have the power have a voice. We are trying really hard to do a lot of that work. And the last is engaging with Thunderdome and letting that be everything else. Those first three things are all about local, and the last is just plug all the Thunderdome stuff we're doing around that. So, and if any newsroom can't answer that, then it can't answer all 4 of those affirmatively, then we look at restructuring. So, and I'll just close with a couple of lessons from local and take questions after that. I think from a content perspective, and we already talked about mobile, so I'll skip over that one. The biggest challenge I think that a lot of mobile content sites have, local content sites have, is I always say that there are 2, I think the news organization, especially local in the new world, has to fulfill 2 things. It has to be a water cooler, and that's great. You want to have a place where people can talk about the news, but it also has to be, I guess, for lack of a better term, an ATM. It's also got to be a place a local resident can go to get information that they just care about. It's not the big news of the day. I want to know what my neighbor paid for his house. I want to know if the restaurant I'm going to has ever been closed by the health board. I want to know what the federal worker or what the state workers in my town are making. Whatever it is, I think we're good at the first one and we stink at the second one. We still don't understand the power of data and of all the things that really power a local community. Local communities, people want all sorts of different things. Yeah, they'll unite around certain issues. But at the end of the day, every local consumer wants to be able to go get information about what's going on in their community that isn't about breaking news. It's about just getting information. So our focus, and we use that sort of ATM, water cooler sort of comparison, is which one, are we doing both of those okay? Because if we're just doing the water cooler part, you are completely focused. Your traffic will be completely unpredictable. It's all about breaking news. It's all about you having a big news day, a slow news day, a fast news week, a slow news week. We cannot build our traffic future on crossing our fingers and hoping a story breaks. So we're working really hard on the latter part. We have in Thunderdome, we actually have a database team of 5 people who are now doing all this data work for the papers around the country because most of these papers don't have the size staffs or the skill sets in the newsroom to do a lot of database journalism. So we're doing projects every day for papers around the country trying to build in these parts to their websites like the ones I mentioned before, home sale, crime reports, all of those important things. We talked about location. That's really important. The hybrid model remains important. There's still an amazing amount of local sites that still don't have engagement beyond commenting. And I think if your local site only allows people to respond to things you've already done, again, you're limiting your traffic growth. One of the great things about community is if you just want to put the hat on and look at it through the prism of when you can get people on your site talking to other people on your site, not only is it good for you because the connection's being built, but that's If you want to look at it in a purely, mercenary way, it is free traffic. You didn't have to get anything to get that traffic. You're actually getting people to talk to each other on your own website. They're building relationships. They're driving traffic. They're driving engagement. And yet, I still go to a lot of sites that somebody will send me a link saying this is a pretty good hyperlocal site in X state, and you look at it, and all you can do is comment. There's really not much you can do, and most hyperlocal sites are past that, but I'm always surprised how many seem to still be thinking of engagement as really just putting a platform out there for people to respond to what you've already done. And I think the last is, it's being picky about priorities. I don't think that's an issue for this group. It's an issue I deal with when dealing with other print newsrooms, is they still have this mindset that I have to cover everything. I had 500 people in my newsroom, 5 years ago, and now I only have 150. The stat I always use when people complain about newsroom size is the Washington Post at its height had 1,000 people in its newsroom, and now it's probably down to about 575. They broke Watergate, they had 375. Right, still a lot of people, but if they could help take a president down, Post hates it when you say they took a president down, they helped. But if you can help take a president down with 375 people, you can still put out a pretty good newspaper with 575. And I think at a lot of papers, all they want to talk about is what they used to have, what they used to have, what they used to have. We have 100 people in the San Jose Mercury newsroom right now, San Jose Mercury newsroom. You can cover San Jose pretty well with 100 people if you leverage the community and if you actually decide that you don't need to do it all by yourself. And I think in the media world, we're terrible at that. And I think that's what we're trying to get at is what do we need to cover and what can we farm out? Well, we have partnerships with local, in fact, we have this thing called the Community Media Lab across almost all of our papers where we partner with local bloggers. We, I think, have 6,000 blogs or sites that we partner with around the country across our papers. So that's what we're doing, and that's just my Jodie Foster-like rant about my 17 years in digital journalism. I'm not saying anything more than that, but if anybody has any questions or about experience or any of the experiences cited there or any in general, fire away.
If I take what you're saying to its logical conclusion, one could argue content is not king in this model.
Well, I think it is king in the sense that our newsrooms have to produce. I mean, that's why we're focusing on content creation and not the processing of that content. That's why copy editing was the thing that went mostly at Denver, because without the creation of it, the rest of the process doesn't really matter. So no, I think content in local absolutely is not only king. Content is king, but information can also be, so it's not, I mean, it depends on how you're defining content, I guess would be the question. Mm-hmm.
I can know what the restaurant is. So the highest level of product is in fact experience, of which content is the ingredient.
Yes. No, I think that's fair. I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, content's always going to be, without it, that's sort of the price of entry. If you don't have good content on your site, you're dead. Now you have to be able to do, but it also isn't a bulletproof vest. You can put a lot of great content on your site, and if the user experience stinks and you don't provide anything beyond that, any ability to engage, then that's also not enough to make it. Oh, I'm sorry. Waiting for the mic.
Hi. You talk a lot about engagement over and over. Aside from the commenting and some databases, can you expand upon that?
Sure.
Are you talking about social media? What else?
No, it's certainly part of it, but I mean real actual engagement, and I probably should specify that too. Real engagement is actually getting people like in your building. So we have a paper in Connecticut called the Torrington Register Citizen, where the news meeting is actually open to anybody. So if the public wants to come in and sit in on the news meeting and hear what the paper's going to write the next day, they can just come on in. They want to come in and bitch about a story that was in the paper, they can come in and bitch about a story. They have a story idea. Most of our papers, especially on the Journal Register side, all put up their budgets at like 12 in the afternoon, basically around noon, saying, here's everything we're working on today. Here's the reporter working on the story. Here's their email address. If you have a tip, just reach out to them. So it's actually engaging them in the news gathering process, not just engaging them by giving them tools to talk to you, but it's saying, we want you to be a part of the process. And you develop, and what a lot of those newsrooms find out is, first of all, they say things like, you expect us to put our big investigative story out to the public, tip the competitors off? It's like, no, I mean, you have to be smart about it. I mean, if you have something you want to hold on to it. But a lot of the reporters find out quickly when their email goes up on the site attached to a story, they start getting emails and calls that develop new sources, help move the story forward. So, I mean, that's the kind of engagement we're focused on. We have I think about 25 of our papers now have some version of an open newsroom. They don't all allow the news meeting attendance. It obviously depends on security issues. Are you in a place where you just want people wandering into your office? But we have community rooms where we do once weekly meetings with public officials or with the editorial staff. We have about 4 vans that are hauling around different parts of the country now that we take out to news events and actually, or so take out to county fairs and give people Wi-Fi access and let them come into the van. Sounds kind of creepy, I guess, but we let them actually just use the tools that we bring. So I mean, that's engagement. It's got to be real engagement, human to human, not just digital. And I think that's and when I say a lot of people miss the engagement piece, that's the part they're missing. They're doing all the tools and the social media, but if you're not actually seeing the people who you're covering, it's harder for them to build a connection. And I think I have the end sign being held up there. So if anybody okay. Well, I'll just wander over there if you want to chat over there. Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much.